Cresselia is back in the raid pool. Until June 18th, we are stuck with this big pink monstrosity once again. But if you beat Cresselia this time around, you do have a chance to encounter the paint job, the shiny Cresselia, which is pretty hype. Now you might be sitting back and thinking, Ryan Swag, you already have a Cresselia counter guide out there. Why do we need a new Cresselia counter guide? Well, there are some huge differences in this raid compared to that raid. Yeah, if you don't recall, when PvP dropped, there was some huge changes to type effectiveness. Basically, super effective hits now slap harder, and resisted hits now slap softer. Along with that, raid boss HP was also changed to accommodate these changes to keep the raid boss difficulty on the same level. Of course, all of this means that while the counters are effectively the same, it is fundamentally the same raid. It's a psychic type Pokemon. Just get your dark and ghost type Pokemon ready. It is different enough. For that reason, I now have an updated Cresselia guide. Also, my last Cresselia guide only featured like all the movesets averaged together. This one will focus on the duality, the differences between the Future Sight moveset and the Moonblast moveset, because Moonblast, Giratina and the Dark types, they don't like that. Future Sight, Gengar, he doesn't like that. So let's get into it. Also, in the second half of this video, I will be discussing its usage in PvP. Nothing has changed for its raid usage. Cresselia sucks. In PvP, it's pretty great, but it might not be as great as it once was. So yeah, watch for that as well. So starting out with the basic, we have the Confusion Future Sight raid. So this is a graph of level 40 counters, unless stated otherwise, versus a tier 5 Cresselia using Confusion and Future Sight. No dodging. The dodge bug has been fixed, allegedly. Everyone's been saying it's been working, so you can dodge. With Best Friendship. And the y-axis is DPS, so how fast you deal damage to the raid boss. And the x-axis is TDO, which is your tankiness, more or less. It's a more useful metric for tankiness. And featured on the graph, I do have the trio line, although I do have a little special note that with a re-lobby, it will increase the trio line here. Because when you're re-lobbying, you're not dealing damage, so your average damage going down. And I also note that the quad is at 12.5, which isn't featured on this graph, but just let you know, reference point, where that's at. And then I also have a line that I don't feature very often, the re-lobby avoid TDO. Basically, I just took 100, divided it by 3 because that's the number of players, and divided by 6, that's the number of Pokemon. So on average, this is the TDO that you need to be like beyond this line in order to avoid re-lobbying, so you can, maintain the 16.66 DPS here to do the trio. But if any of your Pokemon and your partner's Pokemons end up dipping beyond that line to the left, well, then you're probably going to re-lobby, which means you're going to have to amp up the DPS you need to clear the raid. And if you're wondering about all the other points on the graph, if they don't have an asterisk, that means they're a break point, which is where your Pokemon's fast move does 1 extra damage. It's pretty relevant. Link in the description to a breakpoint calculator to find out your specific IV spreads level that you need to hit those breakpoints. And then if it has an asterisk, then that is most often a bulk point, which is the level in which your Pokemon's HP and defense are such that you're able to survive a significant amount of fast moves and a charge move that's relevant to this raid. Link in the description to a bulk point calculator, and link in the description to a guide on using Don's bulk point calculator if you're interested in finding out complex bulk points. And then finally, 2 Pokemon, I believe on this graph, have pre-break points with a note on them. So like Houndoom here, 38.5. Its break point is at 39, so I felt it'd be relevant to show what Houndoom's performing at when it's not at level 39, because level 39 is basically level 40. So details, right? The best counters for the Future Sight raid are obviously going to be these upper quadrant boys over here. We got Giratina O, standing tall, finger in the air. If you watch my Giratina O video, I told you that this is definitely a Pokemon worth powering up. Most powerful ghost/dark type in the game. It is a ghost type, not a dark type, but because ghosts and darks have the same exact coverage, they're often lumped together in the same crew. So yeah, Giratina O, definitely a huge investment, performing very well in this raid. And then when you go down, you'll see that there's this lovely cluster of Shadow Ball Mewtwo, Tyranitar, and Weavile, all competing for the number 2 slot here. I'd say best overall at max investment would be Tyranitar because he's so tanky. But Weavile actually has a pretty good showing here. At the level 28.5 breakpoint, it is meeting the Rillabi Avoid TDO and having trio-worthy DPS at level 28.5, which Mewtwo and Tyranitar definitely can't boast at a similar level, which is actually pretty impressive. So good job, Weavile. That aside, everything else, more or less, speaks for itself. One thing I do want to note, a little bit of importance for you guys, is these ghosties here. They have really high DPS, but it comes at a price. Yeah, so we got the Relobby Avoid TDO, and if you relobby, that increases the amount of DPS you need to do the trio, right? Well, there is a double Relobby Avoid TDO that I didn't include on here. So you just take the 5.55 repeating and divide that by 2, which ends up being like 2.8, right? So here, there's like an invisible line, and that is the double Relobby Avoid TDO. So if you don't have high TDO Pokemon backing up your ghosts, you might end up going towards the double Relobby side of the force, which is kind of disgusting. So yeah, if you are using a heavy ghost squad and you are going for the trio, definitely look towards the Giratina, and these other thick boys over here might be important. And down here, I also include a little note for Heatran, Metagross, and Alolan Muck. Their X, so their TDO, is like 4.5, which is pretty respectable. And their DPS isn't that bad. I mean, obviously these guys are all way better, but they're not that bad. So because of that, I just decided to include them. They can help out in the quad, and if you're just a basic low-level player and you don't really have anything, you don't even have Weaviles or Honchkrows, you're out there. I know it. Well, these are also pretty decent options. Oh, and if you are curious, I didn't include rainy weather points on this graph because, you know, these guys are already doing it so well. And had I included rainy weather points, the bug types still wouldn't be as good as this lovely trio right here. So I felt it wouldn't be relevant to clutter this graph even further. But if you are curious about their performance, you can always use Go Battle Sim, run the simulations, and add the points on the graph yourself. It's just their TDO and their DPS, so it's pretty straightforward. And yeah, you can screenshot this, mix and match, make your own graph. And final point of curiosity, this guy up here, the unreleased Pokemon, that is Darkrai. Darkrai is a mythic dark type Pokemon. It's not in the game yet. It'll be in the game one day. And right now, with the moves that it has in the current Game Master, it may put it ahead of Giratina in some situations. And against the Future Sight Raid, that is one situation where Darkrai does edge out the Giratina origin form. But as you will see, against the Moonblast moveset, it's actually a bit less than Giratina. So, best dark type question mark? Well, it's the best dark type that is a dark type. But when you compare it to a dark and a ghost type, same coverage, right? Same Pokemon, more or less. Giratina still sports some pretty tasty benefits. And here we got the Cresselia counters against the Moonblast moveset. So Moonblast, Fairy type charge move, super effective to Dark types and Dragon type Pokemon. So all the lovely Dark Dragons, they're not loving it. But Fairy is resisted by Poison types, so Gengar is most definitely loving it. One important thing to notice is I don't have the Relobby Avoid TDO featured here on this graph because the only Pokemon that really meets it is Mewtwo, and Mewtwo just barely meets it, so it's not really worth putting on here. But obviously, if you do dodge the Moonblasts, that will potentiate your ability to avoid relobbying. But I think in this particular fight, Confusion Moonblast, it's going to be pretty difficult to avoid the relobby, even with dodging. As such, while the trio line is still at trio DPS, which is 50 divided by 3, with the relobby, which you're probably going to experience, it's going to be around 18 DPS, depending on how quickly you relobby. And then, as I mentioned, Darkrai, best Dark-type Pokemon. Yeah, in this particular fight, it is less than Giratina. Both of them are getting super effective damage from the Moonblast, so it just suggests that overall, everything being equal, Giratina slightly better than the Darkrai. So yeah, I definitely maintain that Giratina Origin Form is a really good investment if you want just a solid, good Psychic type counter Pokemon. You can see up here that Shadow Claw is better than Lick, and at the level 35 bulk point, both Gengars are equal to their level 40 iterations, so you can cut off pretty early there with Gengar power-ups if you are familiar with breakpoints and bulk points. Calculators in the description, of course. But when you go down to their level 31.5 breakpoint or their 27 bulk point, they're basically the same in performance, so That's why they follow one similar line. And just so you don't get confused, I put these three off. They are featured here, right in this cluster of everything else going on. So I just moved their Trozeas off to the side to make this area a little bit more decipherable because it's kind of a mess. So the pink is Mismagius and the brown Pinsir and the green. I'll let you figure out which Pokemon the green is. Now, a final wrap-up note to include about these two graphs is it is against Moonblast and Future Sight specifically. Using Confusion, the Psycho Cut raids will be a lot easier, and Ice Beam will be easier as well. So the reason why I'm featuring these two particular fights is because I want you to be prepared for the worst case scenario rather than taking it easy or have the difficulty of these raids diminished by including the easier simulations. So prepare for the worst, and you're always ready for the easiest, right? Alright, now moving on to the PvP side of the force, Cresselia is actually pretty cool. In the Great League, in the Ultra League, it has some swag. Master League, not so much. When PvP first came out, Cresselia was actually a really dominant force in the Great League, but nowadays I don't think it's as hot. And the reason why it's not so hot is because of the dominance of the Steel types. Medicham currently rules the Great League. We know this. But one of the main reasons why Medicham rules so well is because the Steel types are actually like the Shadow Kings of the Great League. They just have to put up with Medicham. So you can bring in Cresselia as a Medicham counter, and that will work, but Skarmory and Probopass, Bastiodon, Melmetal, even Magnezone are going to give Cresselia a really hard time. So overall, I'd say for the Great League, the general Great League, Cresselia is not your ace in the hole pick anymore. I wouldn't worry about doing the unlucky trade to get the 1500 CP, etc. Definitely probably not worth your Stardust at this moment. But in the future, if there is a Sylph Cup that's like, whoa, we didn't ban Cresselia and it's actually really good, well, then you might want to have a couple saved up so you can try to get the unlucky trade with your friends so you can get the CP at the right level, right? Could be a good idea. But right now, because Steel types are so ridiculously good, and Medicham has answers that can also put up with Steel type Pokemon, I don't think Cresselia is it. As far as the Ultra League goes, Cresselia is pretty cool. I know I haven't done my Ultra League guide yet, and I am putting wheels in motions to finally get an Ultra League guide up for you guys, so I apologize that it hasn't been up yet. More priorities in front of it. But Cresselia is pretty cool, and the reason why it's cool is because it can counter Giratina. Giratina is the daddy Mac. Everything you need to know about the Ultra League is Giratina, things that counter Giratina, and then things that counter what counter Giratina, right? So where does Cresselia fall in this mix? Well, Cresselia is a pretty decent Giratina counter. However, if Giratina's heavy on the ghost type attacks, well, Cresselia becomes a bit less reliable. So where does Cresselia pick up? Well, Cresselia is good at also countering the things that counter what's meant to counter Giratina. So if Giratina is the rock, and there's paper Pokemon that beat Giratina, then there's the scissors, right? Well, Cresselia holds its own against the fighting type scissors Pokemon, namely Poliwrath and Lucario. So it has swag against them, and it has swag against Giratina, and it can also hold its own in the crazy swirl that is the Giratina counters and how they interact with each other. So for those reasons, Cresselia is a really good option for the Ultra League. The particular strategy I'd advise using Cresselia in your Ultra League team would to be alongside another Giratina counter. So you can double up on Giratina counters because your Cresselia can counter the scissors Pokemon, right? But a more detailed Ultra League guide is coming out in the near future. I'm going to do the best I can to get it up by next week because it's been ages. So soon. More details on that soon. But I hope this whets your palate for what Cresselia may be in PvP. And if you are curious about the raids and you didn't hear me the first time, yeah, Cresselia is not a very good raid attacker. So definitely not worth it there. It's as exciting as a Reggie, basically. Now, if you're curious what comes next, it's going to be Kyogre, and after that, Groudon. So I will have videos updating those guides because my previous ones are also outdated because of the damage and all the new Pokemon. So expect those soon from SwagTips. So if you like this video, you want to see more like it, well then make sure to subscribe. And if you got any questions on this content that you want answered, comment below, let me know what's up. I'll be happy to help you out. By the way, if you're going to Pokemon Go Fest, I will be there for the YouTuber meetup on the 12th, so that's one route to meeting Ryan Swag. If you're wondering what my Go Fest ticket day is, it is on the Friday. So I will be on the Go Fest grounds on Friday. If it's anything like last year, I'll probably be bumming around the area quite often. I'll be at the Sylph meetup, and I'll be at the Verified Level 40 after party, so plenty of opportunities to run into the Swag Man. If you do run into me, I did buy my local card shop all out of their Wurmples. So if you want a Ryan Swag signed Wurmple, well then just ask. And yeah, and if you want me to mail one out to you, it's not happening.